Hey, deserving listeners, there's a lot of interviews and whatnot after Love is Blind Season 3 with the cast members. Let's watch.
They did not have to say what you said from the altar when you had never once said those things to my face. So that's
So
a problem.
how do you chalk it up? Why did she do what she did? Like, was she trying to do good TV? Like, what she wants to villainize you? Like, why would she do that to someone in general? What's your, how do you like explain it to yourself, I guess?
I mean, I just think that I think I think girls' feelings are very real. I think Zinab genuinely felt those things. I just think it's unfair.
First off, the interviewer is very good, very casual, and asking all the right well, not right questions, but the questions that I would want to ask, but I would not do maybe as well as she is because she's just cutting to the chase. But she asks, how do you conceptualize why would she do that? Why would she? And he was saying that she never said those things to him and that he would have absolutely heard her if she had said those things prior, because she contends that he never would have listened to her, which again flies in the face of her story. If she was saving these things up, well, maybe her story is, I didn't know I was going to say no, but when I decided in that moment I was going to say no, then I thought, well, I can finally tell it. Anyway, I guess that's her story. But he did say something that bugs me, as you know. I think someone said, like, nothing will cause me to pause and comment quicker than if someone says, well, women are, or men are, this kind of thing. So he says that girls, he uses the word girl a lot. And there's a debate as to what exactly that means, if that's demeaning to women, to adults. And so we could have that conversation, of course. But then he says, girls' feelings are real. Let's rewind that.
Explain it to yourself, I guess.
I mean, I just think that I think girls' feelings are very real.
Yeah. I'm just going to take a guess and say that he was indoctrinated into American misogynistic sexist culture in which believes that women are more emotional than men, that women are more caring, more compassionate, but also more frivolous and more reactive, more irrational. These are notions that have been disproven by tons of empirical data. Women are not more emotional than men. And even, what do we mean by that exactly? Also, women have not been demonstrated to be more nurturing than men are. You can, because people will say, like, well, if you have a gay couple, gay men, and they have a child, that denies the child that all-encompassing, compassionate, nurturing mother. Well, the data doesn't show that. The data shows that men can be just as compassionate and nurturing and caring and attentive as women can, because of course they can. Why couldn't men do that? Now, men are socialized in a particular way that makes it harder for them sometimes, but it doesn't mean that inherently, like biologically, they aren't able to do that. So there's that. But he is saying that statement that women, so so not only is he from American culture, but I wonder if in his religious culture it's even more pronounced, or wherever he's from. Where is he? Is he from Texas? Anyway, so he is saying that, but if we put that aside, which it's hard to put aside, it's really, who cares about what Cole just said, really? It's not like it destroys the world, but those kinds of attitudes and beliefs, when I hear them, I know there's a lot more behind that, and that does affect a lot of things. Like when women are running for office, it's been demonstrated that voters, because of misogyny and sexism, they'll look at the woman and think like, well, she's dumber, she's more emotional, she's more volatile. Men are more stable and more logical. It's just ridiculous. And on the flip side, people will look at gay men couples and say like, ooh, they must be abusing their child because there's no woman involved. You'll hear stuff. It's really just awful. So, and thus some gay couples, some gay men will not be able to adopt as easily because of that notion. I mean, just think about that. And there's thousands of negative consequences to this, and internalized sexism, internalized gender stereotypes. I've suffered from it personally. Obviously, I've also participated in it, of course. I've witnessed it. I have treated a lot of clients regarding it. It's just a pervasive aspect of our culture that he just exhibited this tiny little statement that triggers me. So, but anyway, I think if we put that aside, he's saying that she's a typical woman in that she has a lot of feelings. So if we put aside the typical woman, she has a lot of feelings. That's the way that he's conceptualizing it. That's not the way I conceptualize it. I've conceptualized already, but okay.
I think Zena genuinely felt those things. I just think it's unfair to not share those as it's happening with the guy that you're with and let him know, like, hey, like, this is.
Also, I wonder if he has a similar complaint about his first wife, that she also had a lot of feelings that were confusing to him and were not told to him before they blew up. Who knows? But it sounds like maybe that's the case, because earlier he seemed to indicate that his first wife decided to break up with him, divorce him rather abruptly, and then he never talked to her again because she blocked him and all this stuff. I don't know. It's possible that in his observation, he's like, what is up with this? These big feelings, and then all of a sudden, boom.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Unfortunately, life doesn't come with a user manual. Navigating all the various challenges we face can make you feel unsure or stuck in place. Whether it's a relationship, or going through grief, or considering a new career. And, generally speaking, a therapist can really help with that, by helping you to explore your feelings, and by giving you the space to clarify what you want to do. In my life, I can't imagine where I'd be without the therapy I've had. During some of the biggest moments of my life, therapists have been there for me, to slow me down, to listen to me, to help me explore. Well, that's where BetterHelp comes in. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online. Plus, it's affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/Kirk. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
Because it's like, I mean, she remembered the cutie thing, right? Like at the reunion, she described it to a T. She was like, I said the thing about it. She was like, all I've been eating was peanut butter. Like, I didn't remember this at all, because to me, it wasn't a thing. To her, it was a real thing. So I think, like, someone like her, like the girl that you're with, like, I really was hurting her. That moment obviously hurt her, else she wouldn't have remembered it. But I wasn't trying to hurt her. I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly looked that way. And I hypothesized this in the past, but just very briefly. For people who are preoccupied, attached, these individuals, because they're preoccupied, we use that word specifically because the individual is often thinking about things and thinking negatively about things, meaning that, well, they did that thing, that must mean they hate me, or does this person love me? They indicated yesterday that they loved me, but do they love me today? Are they cheating on me? It's preoccupied, it's anxiety about losing your partner, which, if you're unaware of the complex and the pattern, then it can lead to distortions and assumptions and paranoia and triggering and hurt feelings, and then anger, and then pushing people away, and da-da-da. So for these individuals, they tend to catalog things much more often. Disorganized people can do this as well. They will remember. They'll remember a thing that you did to them 15 years ago, and they will remember it very well because in their preoccupation, that bullet point, that story, that anecdote will pop into their head at times. Like, is this happening again? And then they'll review it in their mind. Whereas if you're not like that, when things happen, even in the moment that might impact you negatively, you don't tend to remember it as well because you don't think about it later on. Memories are solidified through recall. When you repeat, that's why we use flashcards, right? You repeat with the flashcard, because the more often you expose your neurons to this thing, whatever you're trying to remember, the more likely you will remember it later on. So there's that. But the other thing that I might explore with Cole, if he were my client and I knew all this stuff, would be that he might actually be giving off a vibe that makes it hard for people to tell him when he hurts their feelings or when he does things that are bothersome to them. I don't know, but I could imagine that being the case. It doesn't mean that he's at fault for that, but it could help in his future relationships. And again, there's a lot of speculation here. And of course, he is in therapy from what I understand. And of course, they know a lot more. That therapist knows a billion times more about the situation than I do. So I'm not claiming I know more than they do. But I wonder if for Cole, he inadvertently gives off this vibe that makes people believe that he's not open to hearing that kind of stuff, or that he wouldn't care if you did tell him, or he gives off a vibe of someone that just doesn't like to go in that direction. And I could see that I could see Zenab going, well, I want to tell him, but he doesn't seem to really be open. So what I would suggest to the Coles of the world is to be more overt. I've heard this kind of complaint from a lot of people, personally and professionally, where they'll say, like, I don't understand why people don't tell me things. Why did they withhold this information? And one of the things that you can do, and again, it's hard to say if it's their fault, the Coles people fault, or if it's other people's fault, but regardless, one of the things you can do is be more proactive, more active in trying to elicit that information. So it's possible that if Cole had been, as a pattern, more often asking Zenab and just saying, hey, so I just want to check in and say, how are we doing? Do you have any complaints about me? Do you have anything that's rattling around in your head that I did recently? Because, sometimes I can be a little bumbling and a little clueless and naive, and I can hurt people's feelings sometimes. I know that about myself. I'm not trying to do that. I want you to know that, but it would really hurt me if I knew that you were harboring some resentment about me and didn't tell me, because, I do care, and maybe I'll get defensive, but I'd like to think of myself as someone that would be able to hear that. I really want to know that information. I imagine that if Cole had said that a few times and really, really convinced Zenab that he was open to that, I imagine that she would have said something. It'd be hard not to, especially if you're preoccupied, because you've got a lot just below the surface, and then you open the door a little bit to someone like that, and if you're convincing enough, the Zenabs of the world a lot will come out, right? So I wonder if he could benefit by doing that more often in his next relationship. And I guess we could all think about that. We could all think about how we do that for our partners. Because even if you are a fairly good listener and a fairly non-defensive receiver of feedback from your partners, it's just really scary. When you have a resentment or something you're hurt or angry about your partner, it feels like a landmine field. It feels like a minefield, right? So if your partner traverses the landmines and comes to your side and say, hey, by the way, do you have anything? I'm open. Now's the time, or tell me whenever, then it might reduce some of those barriers such that the person can actually say something. I think that's something we can all think about in terms of our relationships, how often we open that door and invite people in.
Know I had hurt her. So I just think it's unfair to guys if you aren't communicating that, and then you.
Here's the thing again, guys. I imagine for him, there might be a lot of men that he talks to that have similar complaints. So, well, let me talk about this. There's this notion out there that's pretty pervasive that that they nag, right? This is more prevalent in the past, but I think it's still around, obviously. And women complain, and there's this whole set of jokes that are just so cringy that, well, the wife, she's not going to like that one. And there's a lot of different reasons for this, or that women will gossip more than men, this sort of thing. And women are more sensitive than men, that sort of thing. And what do I say? There's so much to say, but I'll provide one of the many profiles that leads to this misunderstanding of gender and emotion. But there are many others, but this is a fairly common one. So bear with me and understand that this doesn't explain the whole thing, but I think it does explain part of it. That we socialize women to girls to be more allowing of them. We tell everyone that emotions are bad, but we tell boys that emotions are even worse, right? Like, it's not like girls are allowed to feel their emotions, that women feel free to feel no one feels free to feel their emotions in our society in all likelihood. But women are shamed less so. So that's one factor. And boys are socialized to not ask for help, to get angry instead of weak and vulnerable, weak in quotes. Men are told that success and dominance are better than dependence and relationships. Girls are taught that relationships are the most important thing. In fact, you need to please everyone and make sure that you're always in a relationship. Otherwise, you're worthless. You're an old maid, or you're a lonely woman with cats. And cats get a bad rap. What's wrong with cats? Cats are great. And there's a lot of other examples of those messages that we give to young people, and we don't explicitly tell them this usually. Sometimes we do, but not usually. But it's pervasive. The messages are, when we ask 2-year-olds, when we study young human beings about their attitudes about gender, they already know this stuff, because they've already picked up on it. They've seen it in the cartoons. They've seen it in their families. They've heard it, and they understand that boys are this way, and then it just becomes more and more elaborate and more destructive as they get older. And by the time they're 12, they've already been indoctrinated into the cult of gender stereotypes in our society. So then you have 2 people, heterosexual couple that gets married, or they're in a relationship, and there are problems. And both people are having equal amounts of emotion. They are both feeling rejected. They're both hurt. They're both angry. They're both afraid. They're equal. Okay, they have the same amount of emotion. And for the woman, given her socialization, she's more likely to accept that communication is a way to solve it. And she feels more likely to please. She wants to, well, how can we work together here? The man is taught from day one that you shouldn't depend and that emotions are bad. So so the woman has more functional options available to her. Not always, of course, but on average, given the stereotype, it allows for at least some possibility of functional communication. Let's talk. Let me tell you my emotions. Let me tell you that you hurt my feelings, or whatever. This is why women are much more likely to go to therapy. This is why women are much more likely to go to a physician. This is why women are much more likely to ask for directions when they're lost, that kind of thing. But the man, what is available to him? Anger is available to him, and shutting out, and arrogance and dominance and narcissism. You're overreacting. I don't need any of this shit. Also, drinking. Men are more likely to drink under these circumstances, or smoke weed, or whatever, or spend time at work, or cheat, right? So men have, generally speaking, more destructive ways. Again, that's a massive generalization, but again, it's just this one profile. There are many other profiles. Of course, we're not even talking about queer people or gay people, or poly people. I'm just talking about one profile. Okay, but this is a dominant profile. It's a privileged profile in terms of heterosexual people, and so the dominant group tends to dominate our understandings of a lot of things, including gender stereotypes. But anyway, so what does this result in? Well, it results in the wife communicating what's going on, saying, hey, something's going on here. Now, maybe she's doing it destructively. That could be happening too. But regardless, she's saying something's wrong, and he doesn't have any ability to deal with it. So he's drinking or working or denying or getting angry or shutting down, or, he's suffering. They're both suffering, but she's saying something about it. So you repeat that over 100 years, and you have thousands and millions of couples that are heterosexual. And then as men, since you're in power, you have to, as a group of men, you have to come up with some kind of narrative as to why this is happening. Because as a man, you're experiencing it, and it feels like you're being blamed. You're also being pushed into communicating and emoting in ways that are completely foreign to you and unavailable to you. And you have ideas about all. Anyway, so men will get together in the comedy clubs, at work, when men get together and talk, or whatever, and they confer, and they're like, oh, does that happen to you too? And then you have to come up with some narrative that justifies it, right? That explains it and denies your responsibility in it, and also exonerates you or releases you from having to do what you don't want to do, which is to actually reciprocate and communicate and emote. And one of those narratives that's available to you is that women are emotional, and they are naggers. They nag. That women have feelings and men are just cool. A lot of people have these attitudes, regardless of gender. Though men are just so much easier, right? Men are just they don't worry about things. It's just easier to hang out with men. And okay, there are differences, generally speaking, on average, sometimes around some of these things. That's one of the reasons. There are many other reasons why we have this narrative that women are emotional and they're always complaining about things and they never let things go. This is one of the reasons as to why. And I hope that I made a convincing argument. You don't have to agree with me, but I hope that my argument made sense, that it had a logical progression to it, because I'm speaking off the top of my head, and I don't know if I've ever actually explicitly lectured or even explicitly thought about this before. But, these ideas are all there in my head. Anyway.
Moment obviously hurt her, else she wouldn't have remembered it. But I wasn't trying to hurt her. I didn't know I had hurt her. So I just think it's unfair to guys if you aren't communicating that and then you do what she did at the altars. That's how I understand it. It's like,
it'd be one thing if he said it's unfair for her to have done that to me. Okay. But he's saying it's unfair for women to do this to men. That's a massive stretch. You're talking about the entire population of the planet, that women do this and men do that. And I think it has to do with what I'm talking about. Now, in Cole and Zenib's specific situation, it might actually apply without the gender stereotypes, that she was ruminating more and he was more happy and content, and he was more honest, and he was less sensitive. Okay. All right. Well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.